Welcome to the Saynetwork podcast. I'm Jordan Nix, and I'm here with Jim Sparks.
Hello.
And Captain Emmanuel Masango.
Hello.
Hello. We did it. We finally got Captain Emmanuel Masango on the podcast. We've been trying for about a year now.
He's been dodging us.
I know. It's a miracle.
It's a skill.
Why are you dodging it? Why?
Because I do not like to be on the camera.
You love being on
and
camera.
I don't like to be scripted. I think that's really more it. I'm more of like a freestyle kind of person.
Lucky for you, you're not scripted at all on this.
I was going to say, that was a bad excuse.
I know. For the people who don't know Emmanuel, he is married to Captain Jennifer Masango. They have 3 sons, Manu, Tahana, and Farai. They've been stationed in Tualatin Valley. Did I just butcher that?
No, you nailed it.
Okay.
You nailed it.
I started like, I was like, oh God.
I got it in your head.
I'm going to mess this up. Yeah, you got in my head. Cascade DHQ, Sacramento, and this last year here in the youth department as the Territorial Youth Secretary. While he has bad taste in sports teams, he cares deeply for others and loves to preach. And that bad taste is Arsenal.
And the Spurs.
San Antonio Spurs, not just Spurs.
Portland Timbers.
Yes.
Yes.
And Sac Republic.
He agrees. So growing up in Zimbabwe, what was youth ministry like there for you?
Well, youth ministry there is, I would say, very different. First of all, there's a lot of kids. So the core that I grew up in, there would be like 200 kids for Sunday school, which is a lot of kids to manage and then break up into smaller classrooms for Sunday school. But it was a lot of fun. I remember doing Sunday school as a kid and then actually teaching. And then we had core cadets and for teenagers, but didn't really have a lot of other teen-focused programs. So we did not have, say, your midweek teen night type thing. So that was kind of a lack there. But whenever we did core cadets, which was a smaller group, you would always get a decent turnout. So a lot of the effort for youth was on the elementary age kids.
Oh,
the core cadet lessons, is it the U.S. core cadet lessons, or is it done in the African territories? Is it different curriculum?
I think it's different from what we have in the U.S. My guess is probably whatever they use or used in England at that time. That's probably what we adapted locally.
Interesting.
Wow. What was the transition like coming from there to leading like youth ministry here?
Very different. Apart from the obvious thing I mentioned is the numbers, but even just culturally, how you reach kids and the challenges that kids are facing. For the most part, the kids in Zimbabwe are coming from maybe very stable homes with a lot of support, whereas some of the youth we serve here are coming from broken homes without a lot of support, with a lot of obvious challenges. So it takes a little extra. And then the other piece is the kids, they always respect anybody in authority. So when you're managing a group of kids, it's not very hard versus managing 10 kids. For example, in a cabin and camp, I was a counselor when I first moved here, and it was really hard to lead 10 kids in a cabin compared to maybe 200 in Sunday school.
Yeah.
It's different.
And it was because they weren't as respectful, or just more squirrely, or
it's just really the idea of respect, because the culture there is you respect any adult that's standing in front of you. So it's got this built-in respect. You don't really have to earn it before you get it. Versus here, a lot of the kids, you really have to earn the respect before they can give you the respect. So that's something I really had to learn to say. I can't just come in and say, "Hey, I'm the teacher. Listen to me."
Right.
I had to be creative and adjust and see how I could still reach them to share, the hope that we want to share with the kids.
So you mentioned something about culturally very different. What were some of the stumbling things that you had to kind of sort out that were like the harder hurdles? I mean, you've already mentioned just the way the kids are responding, but
the other thing is accents. So when you're teaching, especially when I first moved here, I had a much thicker accent than I do now. So I realized I had to repeat things a lot. Mm-hmm. I remember one time I was asking a kid, "Where do you live?" But I think the way I said it sounded like, "Where do you leave?" And so he kept saying, "What? What?" I'm like, "What's wrong with this kid?" And then I realized it wasn't him. It was my accent at that point, which was very thick. So it's really interesting when you move to a different context. You have to think about what are the potential hurdles versus assuming you're going to do everything right or the people will listen or understand you right away. So it seems small looking back now, but it's actually a big deal, because if I'm asking a kid, where do you live? I need to get the right answer versus where do you leave, which it doesn't make sense to
Right.
them. So they kept saying, what? What?
Yeah.
How long have you been here?
20 years this year.
So 20 years. And you guys recently went back to Zimbabwe.
Yes.
You went to the core there at some point.
Yes.
What are some differences that you've seen from 20 years ago when you go back?
Not a whole lot, really. The core still is very vibrant. They have a lot of adults, a lot of kids. They just seem to have still the same excitement of being gathered in a place. In fact, the kids can't stay in the service. They usually are in there for the first 10, 15 minutes. And once all the adults arrive, there's not enough room. So the kids have to go out for junior church, but not always as planned out. It's really because there's not space. And it's less about, hey, we need you to be in a space where you're learning at your own level.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, but it's also a good problem to have so many people in church that you need to make room outside.
Yeah.
Is church there usually a lot longer than it is here?
Yes, church services are probably 2 hours to 2.5 hours. Yeah. And so going back after, again, used to 60 minutes, 60, or, if you go for an hour, it's like, oh, we are not even halfway through yet. So I have to practice a lot more patience now than probably I had to before.
Wow. What do you think is there anything that you would say is different about the Zimbabwean expression of the Salvation Army than how it is here?
I would probably say we're a lot louder, which is probably just, a cultural context, very loud. In the Salvation Army, they're still very traditional as well. We have traditional pockets here in the U.S., but I do feel like in Africa, it's still a lot more traditional. If you're not wearing a uniform, you probably can get up and give your testimony.
Yeah.
It's still, uniforms and some of those things are still very strict. But then there's some other things that seem a lot more freedom. For example, I haven't been to many core here where people just feel free to get up and start singing and dancing. You kind of have to wait for the program to carry you along. Yeah. Versus, if somebody feels led to just sing a chorus that everybody knows, they get up and, the service is going this way. Maybe it's going a little bit this way now. Yeah. And for me, it's something I think it's some good freedom, because sometimes we get so programmed, everything is so scripted that we maybe miss some of the good things that could happen.
Yeah. This may be an obvious question, but are the uniforms the same there?
The uniforms are different. So in Zimbabwe and some of the African countries, they were like a cream or beige uniform in the summer, and then they have a charcoal gray for the winter, even though there's really not a lot of difference in weather patterns, but that's how it's been for a long time. But the S's and everything else is the same. The gray looks really sharp. I like it.
Yeah, I need to look that up. I need to see what it looks like. Did you still have your gray uniform?
It doesn't fit anymore.
Oh.
It's because you gotten taller, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, I've grown this way.
All right. Well, thank you, Emmanuel. Jim is going to give us a youth culture topic.
Yeah. Barna. Ever heard of it? Barna
Research Group.
Research Group. Not Hannah Barna.
I was like, what are you? Hannah Barbara?
Did a study recently called The Open Generation, and I won't get super deep into that research, but some interesting things came out that gave a little bit of hope, because sometimes when statistics are given or any type of research given, particularly to young people, it seems like it's always negative. It's rarely ever positive or full of hope. Yeah. And I mean, I feel bad most certainly for the millennial generation, because that was to me, it may not be the case, but to me, that millennial generation, which is not my generation, took a lot of hits. That was it was extra negative. And the irony to me out of all of that is that the people that created the millennial generation are the ones that think that they're ridiculous. So I was like, wait, you created them and you raised them.
You started it.
That's on you. Whatever that is that you're angry about, that's kind of on you. But so they surveyed 25,000 teens ages 13 to 17 around the world. And there's this kind of undercurrent in in the study of optimism and hope. And that's really cool, especially given the last 2 years where it hasn't felt that way. And now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of things about mental health. I gave you guys a study yesterday about mental health and kind of all the things that are going on around this. But this is kind of more positive, and it's kind of fun. So I'm just going to read some of the survey results, and we could kind of chat about them along the way. But 78% feel deeply cared for by those around them, always or usually. 78%.
That's good.
Yeah, feel deeply cared for by those around them, always or usually. 77% say someone believes in them always or usually. I think that's really important.
That's really good.
They feel like someone actually believes in them is really exciting. 68% are secure in who they are always or usually, which that seems very high. Like if I was having to bet, I would bet that number would be a lot lower, but according to these 25,000 people around the world, that 68% are secure. 63% are optimistic about the future, always or usually.
How many? 60?
63%.
63%.
That's
really good.
Yeah, so I mean that's really, really encouraging, and but they also found that these feelings don't exist in isolation. Teens who have community and connections with those around them are far more likely to report these feelings. And the report really kind of goes through that over and over again about the idea of this community and the success that these young people are having or feeling at the very least is those with kind of a community around them. And so, but here's some other stats. 49% are anxious about important decisions, always or usually, which I kind of feel like that might be normal behavior.
It's about half of them,
Yeah, 46% have a need to be perfect, always or usually. 48% are uncertain about the future, always or usually. And 23% feel lonely or isolated from others, always or only. Like 23% seems low given our climate the last couple of years, and particularly the narrative. They're not surprising numbers by any means, but so the three takeaways in this article is that trusted adults can cultivate the lightness in teens today. And Jordan and I recorded a podcast with Emily and Summer, and a word that they use that would be important to them is transparency and making those connections. And I think that's a very important thing that we need to be looking at, and kids need to know. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes as a youth leader, you feel like you need to have all the answers, and you could be able to pop them off and fix them over and over again, which inside I'm like, dude, I don't know. I don't know. And so,
Yeah, I was going to say, the last few years, I personally have been trying to be one of those people that don't pretend I have the answers. If I don't know, I want to be able to say to a young person, to an adult, I say, I don't know. How about we look this up, or I'm going to call somebody who might help us. Because I think we do more damage if we pretend to have it together, and then sooner or later the young people know we don't. Then it hurts that transparency factor, and then it lessens the trust that they have in us, especially as leaders.
Yeah.
This article talks about, that these issues are still there. Anxiety and all these issues are still there, but the idea of them being able to be part of a trusted community that they know cares for them is obviously a very helpful piece to dealing with those.
I think it's interesting how, was it 68% you said feel secure in themselves?
Yes.
That's pretty amazing for, a teenager. I feel like that's usually when you're most insecure. And it kind of speaks to, I think, the climate of like this new generation coming up, that everybody's pretty accepting of just like, you do you. I'm not judging you or anything. So I think there's, I don't know, there's something to see there.
Yeah, there's empowerment there. Yeah. So it gives a couple of things in this article. We'll link it in the show notes of what we could do. But first, foster community. This is something that we've been working on just in our department with Redwoods, and just pushing small group atmospheres through Rooted or Redwoods, whatever you want to do. What are other ways that we could feel like a part of, or have young people feel like they're part of a community?
I think another important one, which I think has come out whenever we've talked to young people, is that somebody listens to them. Because I think sometimes when people come to us, especially young people, we're telling them, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that,
Right.
which there's a place for that. But if we could get to this forum where we say, hey, we want to hear from you. What are your questions or what are your concerns? I think with WYI, that those feedback sessions that we did, for me, reinforced that idea that young people, young adults want us to listen, especially people in leadership. And so if we could listen more and maybe lecture less, that might actually be more meaningful.
Yeah, I think as well, something recently that I just experienced was in my rooted group, like they made everybody kind of throughout the 10 weeks go around and talk about, like, tell their story essentially, and their faith journey, and also just kind of their life story. And I'd never done that before, really, like obviously like telling it to individual people, but never to like 20 people in the room. And like doing that, there's something where you feel really close and connected to everybody once it's like, oh, they kind of know everything about me, it feels like, you know.
Yes.
And just everybody sitting there listening to each other just tell their story, you know, and like, you know, people crying as they get through their story and telling it. And I don't know, there's something that after like hearing all those people's stories, you just feel really connected. So I think there's a lot of power in like your story.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been talking about that with YI and stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, once you hear someone's story, there's a immediate empathy and connection to that, even though you haven't lived it, but now you have this understanding, and it may make a lot of other things clear for you. And you're probably far more likely to be in their corner. Yeah. Particularly if they're struggling with something, because you have a better understanding. And
or like seeing little behaviors they have or something, and you're like, oh, I get it, because your parents were like this, or like little, you know, little things they have, and you understand them better.
You can give more grace when you know people better.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to judge people keeping at a distance if you don't know them.
Yeah.
But if you could get to know them, know their story, it tends to give us more grace and more empathy.
The second point here is to cultivate an engagement with and appreciation of the Bible. The more teens are invested in and in community with adults in their lives, the more engaged they are with the Bible. I think this is a big factor. And I have seen a growing trend of questioning the Bible, questioning, you know, how it was written or how literal it should be taken over the years. And so engaging in a community with people as you're going through the Bible is an extra level, because again, it goes back to, I mean, growing up, I always thought the adults in my congregation knew the whole Bible, and they knew it all. And as an adult, I'm like, I don't know at all. And I suspect that they felt the same way in there. But maybe my thought would have changed a lot if it was like, well, I don't know, and let's figure this out together, and let's get in the Bible and to see what it says. And because obviously we probably have all had experience of seeing how remarkable it is to see how the Bible lines up and how the prophecies have kind of come around. It's quite remarkable. But growing in appreciation for the Bible. Third is to tell the story of Jesus. The gospel carries a beautiful message, unique among all other faiths. It is the story of a God who became man to show a world that he loved him more dearly than his own life. And here's this kind of point, talking about Jesus, brought me back to the book Fuller put out, Growing Young. Yeah, Growing Young. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but it was pretty high of how many Christians, in particular pastors, kids, do not know their parents' story of how they came to know Jesus. Yeah. They don't know their testimony. They've never heard it. And they may have heard parts like up on a stage somewhere, but never been told to their kids. And they don't know. And the stats pretty high. I didn't believe it actually when I read it, so I asked a bunch of kids in the territory, and it's true. They're like, oh, I've never heard that. And so
I've never heard my parents' story. Just realized.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so with that in mind, and talking, I do think that may be something we could be incorporating more of how we experience Jesus and being able to share share that not just with our kids, but for the congregation. And
Congregations,
Jordan,
yeah.
you talked a little bit about that with a smaller group
Mhm.
of what that means, and so that we could get a growing understanding of who Jesus is. Thoughts on that?
Well, it's scary because I'm trying to think right now if I've shared with my 3 boys my testimony. I think they've heard bits and pieces. I don't think I've told them, kind of start to finish. So that's a challenge for me as a parent. But I do think it helps our children when they see us tell our story, when they hear our story. Because sometimes maybe we're in this stage in life where everything is good, but they don't know what we've struggled with, or maybe the times we actually didn't believe in God, or maybe a time where we believed and we walked away. So if we could help them know it's okay, because they'll probably come to a point where they have doubts or questioning this or that, rather than maybe hiding that aspect of our own experience. If we could actually say, hey, maybe I had this spiritually dry season, but then God restored me, I think it would actually help our kids be more open and honest, even if they were to be personally struggling.
I think it also helps you as well, talking through that, to kind of go through that, because I think a lot of times we might push that away and recognize the kind of the journey that you've been on. Okay, so a little bit optimistic news, and kind of interesting. So check, we'll link it in the show notes, but you want to check out the Open Generation survey by Barna. All right, so now we are going to talk about youth programming ideas. And one thing I have come to know about the Masangos is they like to have fun.
Yes.
I have a vivid memory of you guys, both you and Jennifer. You guys were DYSs. We did Bible Bowl up at Camp Karatli. And it was an evening program where we had them run around camp. I can't remember exactly why, but they were running around camp. And they had different stations that they had to go. And you guys had Just Dance.
Yes.
And I could see what I love about Camp Karatli is you could see pretty much all the programming area from one spot. It's just designed beautifully. I love the design of Camp Karatli. And every time I look over, I see Jennifer and Emmanuel all out dancing. And what I came at the time, I'm like, man, these guys are way into these games. And they are. They're always in the games. And I used to think it was for the kids. But now that I've worked for you for a year,
It's for them.
it's definitely for them. And it's definitely
And the
against
kids.
each other. They were having their own competition, whether it was broadcasted or not.
Yeah.
They were certainly having their
And
own
I think I won, the way I remember it.
I'm sure you did.
The way I remember it.
I'm sure you did. And so we're going to talk about a few games. Games are a large part of youth programming. You got to get the kids out of their chairs and moving around, and you actually get better attention that way. So, Emmanuel, give us a game.
Well, one of my favorite games, which is actually really easy if you don't have time to go out or do a big setup,
Always.
is just stand at the front of the classroom or chapel, whatever it is, and then you could divide the teams into 2 teams, either boys or girls or whatever. You split it. Then you invite the audience to bring you the first person to bring, say, a wallet. They run up and they give it to you, and you keep the scores that way. It's amazing how competitive people get. I played that recently in Alaska, and girls like dumping their purses onto the ground just to be ready to get items out, or people just running out to go get a stick or whatever from the lobby or from outside. So that's an easy one. Like if you forgot to plan a game, or if you have kind of some dead time in the middle of the program, you can do that really easily. You don't have to prepare for it. That's one of my favorites because I'm competitive and I'm gonna have everything up there as quick as I can.
That is like it is like a low cost, high reward game. Like there's not a lot of thought that actually needs to be put into that. You could literally be making the stuff up on the spot.
Oh yes.
Of what you're looking for. And people go nuts over that. And what it highlights is that you don't have to have sophisticated games all the time. Like that is as simple as it gets. And you're right. It's guaranteed. People go bananas over that game.
Oh, yes.
And they want to win. I mean, you have the element of competition, which is always kind of going to work. But you could literally be making stuff up.
Oh, yes.
Right there on the spot. Yes, that's a great quick game. Is there a more sophisticated game that you like to play when you're a corps officer with the youth? that you guys did?
Yeah, quite a few. One of my favorite ones is do a scavenger hunt. So you could do this, say, if you have a call with a property, you could walk around this. It could be a scavenger hunt with pictures. You can take pictures and text them, or if you have a long night, you could just create a hashtag and get all the pictures there. Could do it that way, or it could be a video one, like we did one where you go over here, you got to sing a song, and everybody in the group, sing the song. You go over here, you do this challenge, so it's all video based, and then they can all be sent to a person or to a hashtag. So again, that's another one that gets young adults or young people moving. If they have phones, that's an opportunity for them to use a phone in a way that's approved. And so you could, take advantage of that. Because sometimes, once we come in, we're like, well, put your phones away. You could say, this is the day you get to use your phone.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a fun way of
Gets
getting
them all fired up.
Yeah.
Jordan, you got any games that you like playing?
Well, that's funny. I was just thinking about, I've seen that that game where you say oh, bring me your wallet or find me Justin Bieber's mugshot or something or whatever. Right. I used to, during college, my aunt, she's not a blood relative, but she's pretty much my aunt. And she would always ask me to come bartend at her temple for the kid, what is it, bar mitzvah? Yeah. Okay. And so I would just be pouring wine for the adults while all the kids, and there'd always be a DJ, and they'd always play that game. So I just had a flashback to that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. But yeah, and it was good money. They give me $20 an hour, and I'd get a bunch of tips. All these people just hand me tips, so I'd just sit there and I'd just pour a glass of wine for them and hand it to them. But
it's an easy gig.
I know, yeah, it was nice. It happened at least twice a month on a Friday night or something. Yeah, they go all out. But no, I don't really have any games.
We gotta introduce you to some of these.
We're discovering over the course of this podcast that Jordan didn't get himself involved in youth group activities when he was young.
Yeah, not a lot.
He missed out, but he's enjoying that now as an adult. There's a couple of go-to games that I use. Almost always using some variation of games that involve rock, paper, scissors, or paper, rock, scissors, depending on where you're from.
Yeah.
Is fun, and it works. Whether it be just a tournament, all-out tournament, where you have them go head-to-head and you just start whittling them out.
Yep.
That one's always big. There's a game that we play where you have two teams, and the teams are trying to get to the other team's base. Okay. And you could design a course however you want. It could be in a figure eight, it could be in a box, and they're trying to get themselves over to the other base. But in order to do that, they have to run to that base. But if they confront someone from the other team, then they have to play paper, rock, scissors.
Oh, yeah.
Whoever wins keeps going. Whoever doesn't has to go back to the back of the line. And so there's a lot of head-to-head, a lot of people running into each other, a lot of, and it's quick pace. It's fun. That one is almost guaranteed to be a lockdown game. People love that game. When I introduced it to Service Corps orientation one time, they just wanted to play it in random times. That's how fun that game was. So, cool. But I've used paper, rock, scissors for all different types of stuff because it adds different elements to the game where it's got a little bit competitive, but there's a thinking process, and honestly, it's luck, a lot of times. And so you don't have to be super fast or super strong. You just have to be a little bit lucky in some of that. But I throw paper, rock, scissors in everything.
That's a good one.
Yeah. One of those kind of call out things, transition game that is interesting to do, particularly for kids, because it will kind of blow your mind away. Again, this is one of those super simple. Yes, that's very, very simple, but I'm more sophisticated than this. Try it because it's easy and it gets interesting results. Is giving them 1 minute to find an object in the room, and to do a quick object lesson of how that represents Jesus in your life, and you would be blown away of what these kids come for. They first of all, they all run to the water wherever there's water because that's easy, right? And the standard ones, but some kids get really creative in that process. And what I like about that game, it's simple. There's not a lot of prep, but it also gets kids to think about what does Jesus mean in their life and how do I communicate that with others.
Yes.
And some of them are really good. Some of them are not good. Some of them you're like, come on. But you're only giving them a minute. So you got to be graceful, obviously. But that's a transition game that I do a lot with not just young kids, but with adults, like when I'm doing youth leadership training. It's really fascinating what people come up with and what kind of nugget you could get out of their life by just some random object in the room. So
Yeah, that's a good game.
Yeah, it's good.
just another one to toss out there. But those are some youth group games. There's millions online that you can find. But I tend to lean towards the least amount of prep, not because I'm lazy, that get the most amount of results, that are quick, that you can just have in your back pocket always, and that you can fire up and you know that they like. Because that's the other thing about games.
Yeah.
Kids will play the same game over and over and over again. And so there's that expectation. So be creative with your games. If you've been doing a game for a long time, find a way to add different variations into that game, mix it up a little bit, and you're going to fail, but you're going to find a new way of playing that game, and it's much more exciting. A lot of the games that I play are very, very old. Like, they're not new, like mind-blowing games. They're very, very old, and I just put a current spin on them, and it's just very easy to do. So if you're looking for ideas, for program ideas, you could go online and you'll look, and a lot of them are like the Human Knot. And although those are old games, take those, throw a little bit of a mix in there, and have some fun.
Yeah.
Wheel time.
Yeah.
Let's get to the wheel. You nervous, Emmanuel, about the wheel time?
That's just one question I'm hoping I don't get, but we got it. Oh, I got it.
Wait, what?
I don't know what he
What are you saying?
I don't know what I'm saying either.
All right, let's get to the wheel. The wheel of fun. All right, spin in and go. And where's it going to land? This one time in the core van, this has been very popular spinning. I got to change the algorithm.
All right. Yeah. So this one time I'm driving in the van and picking up kids for program. And I always picked up this family first, and they just loved to talk, which was fine. One time the kid says, "Oh, Emmanuel, I've been learning all these different songs I really love." I'm like, can you tell me? He's like, "Oh, yeah, I know that Christian song that says God gave me you for the ups and downs." I was like, "Yeah, that's a really good song." And he's like, "Oh, I got another one." I said, "Okay, what's the next one?" He goes, "Well, it's a little bit different, but it goes like this. Country girl, shake it for me." I was like, okay. I was expecting another Christian song, and the child had a different idea. So that one time in the van, that was really interesting.
I think that was the shortest story.
It is the shortest story we've ever gotten. That's pretty good.
Do you have another one?
I have a van story, actually. So we were going to camp. I rarely rode in the core van. Like, I bet on one hand I could count. Like, I just somehow I missed that part in the Salvation Army because it's a fabric of a lot of people's lives.
I was gonna say, you missed out.
I really did. And but we were about to go to camp, and we were in the van, and we had gone to Taco Bell right before. And so my mom was driving my friend like from the core, and we were going to go. And of course we took a bunch of hot sauce packets for no reason because kids are dumb, right? And so all the parents are in there talking, and I put like 4 hot sauce packets stacked underneath the tires of the van. And so we got in the van and sat. We sat on that side so we could see it, and we were just giggling, right? And sure enough, he backs it up, and that hot sauce exploded, and it shot directly at the parents, and it landed through them. And we couldn't laugh because we didn't want them to know it was us, right? And I certainly didn't want my mom to know it was us. And when they were so mad, they're like grabbing their stuff and like wiping their clothes and stuff like that. And when we turned the corner, We literally laughed all the way up to camp, like for like an hour. It was so funny. But that is the first time I've ever told this story publicly because I was because the one guy that got it the worst would have murdered us. Like he was so angry. We're like, just go, hurry up, just go. Yeah, that was
that's crazy.
That was very, very funny.
You have a good memory. I can't remember anything
of the stories.
It's good.
Well, I'm just getting them all out now. It's like the naughtiness that we did, but yeah, that hot sauce. I can see it right now. How funny that was.
So I wonder which one of your boys is taking up after you.
Yeah. So far, they have done little pranks. Ethan did a prank in 5th grade. He concocted this prank and asked his teacher. Well, he told me about it. I was like, well, ask your teacher. Figuring she would say no. She says yes. And so he had like a little terrarium, like for, like a lizard or something like that. And it was all kind of decorated. I can't even remember what we had it for because we've never had a lizard or anything like that. And so the teacher is like, oh, well, Ethan has something he wants to show, kind of like a show and tell type thing. But there was no show and tell. So he gets up there and he has the terrarium behind his back as he's walking up. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I wanted to show you guys my pet. And this pet means a lot to me. And I was excited that Miss Mills let me share my pet with you guys. And so he takes the terrarium and pulls it out. And then he goes, I want to introduce you to my, the giant spider. What is it?
Tarantula?
Tarantula. To my pet tarantula. And obviously there's no tarantula in there because we don't have a pet tarantula. And then he looks down at the terrarium and just goes, oh my gosh. And then he quickly put the terrarium behind him and he goes, I'm really sorry about that. And he goes, if anyone happens to see a spider around here, can you just let me know? And then he walked back to his desk. And he said that people were the students were jumping up on the tables. They were freaking out. The teacher lost complete control over the classroom. And she was laughing because she knew. Yeah. She knew. And so he pulled that off in his 5th grade class, which if anyone happens to know my son, they wouldn't think that would be coming from him. So that's probably why it was even more effective because he doesn't really joke around like that. But yeah, it was cool.
Wait, which son was this?
That's impressive.
Ethan, my oldest. Yep. And it was one of the last days of school, and he said people were standing on top of their desk and they freaked out. So
wow.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
There was an element of pride there, I gotta be honest. But no, I haven't even told him I really haven't told him any of the stuff that I've done. I don't want him to repeat it. Some of it I'm mad about. Like I was part of a group. We were playing hot potato with this fake hot potato, like Mr. Potato Head. Mm-hmm. And this was at Santa Ana. And we threw it through the stained glass window. And they weren't happy about it for some reason. And so my mom made me pay to get it fixed. And so we did, and it was all resolved and all that stuff. And it's still broken. It's still broken. That stained glass window is still broken. I had confirmation of that just 2 years ago. That stained glass is still broken. So whatever money I gave for that stained glass, it did not go to fixing that stained glass window. Yeah, the youth group I was part of, we broke a few windows. One in Corcadets, one of the guys was just banging on the window because we locked him out. We thought it was funny. So he was banging on the window and he just put his hand right through the window and shattered the whole window.
Jeez. Wow.
We unlocked the door after that. But yeah. All right. My turn to spin. I could tell stories all day long. But all right. My turn to spin. And here we go. Are we boring you, Jordan?
No.
All right.
It's a hot chocolate.
Camp story. Camp story. I got thousands. That could be its own podcast. It's its own podcast.
Jim's camp stories.
Okay, so I don't know why this came to my brain, but it was my first year of being on the program team, and I was the assistant program director. I was young, and I wanted to create new evenings at camp, new experience, and so I had talked to a a senior citizen at my corps who was like a camp person for 20 something years. He was a teacher and then do that during the summer. And he was telling me, I was asking him about all his best old ideas. And because that's where I get a lot of the ideas. I ask previous generations what their ideas were, and then we just ratchet them up for this.
Yeah.
And so he told me about this evening. Now it's probably not. It's certainly not appropriate now. But it was basically a Native American evening, where everyone kind of got their own
people.
Yes, your people. They got their own tribe, and they created their own tribes, basically. And
So messed up.
yep, it is messed up. And but here's what was interesting is there was this big parade that we had going into the campfire pit, and it was cool. It was insensitive, obviously, now, and wouldn't even think to do it, and embarrassed, really, even to tell that part of the story. But for authenticity, there you go. And so they announced what their tribe was, and I think what their tribe stood for. They had to stand for something, and so that part was cool. And then there's a fire trail at camp. And so we took them on this fire trail, and it was going to be stops along the fire trail in which we were telling this Bible story. And I had planned it out. It was all scripted. We had actors in each of the stations. I was really excited about that. And it was, in my opinion, was going to blow the minds of everyone at camp, because we had not done something like that, at least in that generation. And so we get up on the fire trail, and the first stop was awesome. Like, the kids were like locked in. I was like, oh man, this is better than I thought. And I had high expectations. And then we get going, and we hit a beehive.
Oh no.
30 something kids get stung. And it was like chaos. People were running everywhere. People were running down into the shrubs just to get away from these bees, and kids were just getting plucked off one by one and rolling in the dirt. Yeah.
Just getting blocked
Oh,
off.
it was really bad. And so we're retreating. So we were not going to finish the fire trail, and I was really, really disappointed. I was embarrassed, but I felt so bad for these kids. We're like set up triage where we're yanking the stingers out of kids, and they're crying and all that stuff. And everyone's like, what are we doing? I said, just go to the campfire pit. Just go to the campfire pit. We'll be there. Because for some reason I thought I could just take care of everything by myself. Stupid. And so we're taking care of getting the stingers out of all the kids, and the nurse is angry at me, like you would not believe. But I could hear music, because where we had that station was not too far from the campfire. I could hear music. I go, what on earth is going on? And so once that adrenaline and all that stuff kind of settled down, I went over to the campfire pit, and the counselors, because it was all the leadership team that was handling this, the counselors put on an evening program, impromptu, and it was wildly special, like, and awesome. It was so cool. And so for me, it was a learning lesson. I mean, there was some embarrassment, obviously, of the tone of the event. That's embarrassing. But what was kind of interesting is how it unraveled into something even better and far more meaningful that I could have ever done before. And it was a credit to all those people that just stepped in and made something special. And so it was a lesson for me that I'm not in control, and nor should I try to be in control of everything, and allowing things to kind of fall into place sometimes. Was beneficial. That was far more beneficial. And no, there was no Native American nights
after that.
And the weird part is I didn't even realize like how kind of maybe inappropriate. And mind you, this was more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, but when they all started walking towards me, and I was like, oh. Like when you see it in person, I was like, oh. But there was some positives that came out of it. There was some embarrassments, obviously, that came out of it. But that was an interesting moment of how that shifted. And honestly, I think it changed a lot of our summer because we trusted each other, that we're here for the kids to make the most that we can, and it doesn't matter what's going to stand in the way. But somewhere 35 kids are like, oh, this one time at camp they stung by a bee.
They made us go on this hike.
I did do a version of that later on at camp, and it was like Hollywood Week or something like that. The theme was like Hollywood Week, and so we did Indiana Jones, and it was the exact same premise, but we were on an adventure with Indiana Jones.
That's cool.
And he took us through, and there was 3, I think maybe 4 stops where Indiana Jones was fighting with people and stuff like that. And we had stunt doubles like Indiana Jones zipping down a zip line at one point. And
That's fun.
in fact,
That's
I think
cool.
we had 4 different Indiana Jones that none of them looked alike, but the kids just went along with it because they knew what was going on. Like, because Indiana Jones was climbing up the rock wall and he went behind the rock wall, but then there was another Indiana Jones on top of the rock wall fighting people on there. And then there was a third Indiana Jones that jumped on the zip line and went down. It was wildly choreographed, but it was fun. But that's what's fun, is to take chances sometimes, and you'll fail and sometimes you win. But that is my stories.
That's a good one.
That's it. That's all I got.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for those stories. Emmanuel is going to give us a plug for a monthly youth ministry resource.
All right. This one is exciting. Also a little odd because I'm the one that usually does these.
What?
But yeah, so once a month you can look forward to an email that has a monthly youth resource. We're just trying as a department to offer as many resources as we can. It can be something about, how to lead troops or Corps cadets, or it could be, for example, this month we're talking about how we could use social media in ministry. So just different resources. Once a month, expect an email from me. If you are not on one of our mailing lists or on a Salvation Army email, just let us know. We'd be happy to add you on there, whether you're a paid youth worker, a Corps assistant, or a volunteer youth worker. We'd love to get you hooked up with our monthly youth resource.
Nice.
Awesome.
We're talking social media this last one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Social media.
Ever heard of it? It's staying around, I think.
Social media. I think it's going to be around for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Captain Emmanuel, for joining us. Anything we've talked about in this episode is linked in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Saynetwork podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube so you don't miss out on new content. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with a new episode and new guests. All right. See ya.
Thank you.